Imagine growing up in a strict household, the kind many of you have heard about, where rules don't just guide your choices, they practically breathe down your neck. Now take that household and multiply it by 10. And hey, you get an Indian household. Now you take that household and place it inside a tiny Middle Eastern country like Bahrain, where everyone knows everyone and privacy is more of a theory than a reality. Yes, that was my childhood. And it wasn't just my parents alone. It was a joint family with uncles, aunts, and grandparents. Basically, I had a full surveillance team present to always guide me and offer friendly suggestions, which in an Indian household usually means do it exactly this way. Now, to give you a sense of how intense that was, the first time I stayed at the library in Bahrain late just to finish a school project of mine, and it wasn't even that late. It was only 8 p.m. and yet my mother showed up like a detective in a crime thriller at the library, scanning through the shelves as if I'd run away from home. 5 minutes later, my grandfather phoned for a status update. And my ever ally, he reminded my mother gently that it was only 8 p.m. and maybe that library did not require a full-on investigation. After hearing that, I felt relieved. But turns out, no one sided with him. When I reached home, I was met with firm instructions that this should never happen again. Now that was the level of monitoring I grew up with. So you can imagine my shock when I arrived in the United States, a place where liberty feels like it's floating in the air. Here people are choosing their own majors, taking solo trips, and deciding their own curfew times, and some people don't even have them. It felt like someone had handed me a world map, car keys, and said, "Carpe diem, Saaj, seize the day and make your life extraordinary." Let me tell you about my first semester in college. We had weekend plans every single weekend, from parties to late night food runs to movie nights, you name it, and we had it. It always started with, just come for a bit, and somehow ended with, how is it 2 a.m. already? And yes, on top of all of that, I chose Arizona State University, a school with a very specific reputation. Number 1 in partying. So there I was, a girl raised in a household where an 8 p.m. library visit triggered an investigation, landing at a school where weekends sometimes begin on Thursdays and sometimes on Tuesdays if the group chat is convincing enough. And yet, having that freedom did not mean that I lost direction. I still treated my ASU major map as a checklist to my future. Because the thing about freedom is that once you have it, you also inherit something else. Responsibility. And one day, my pre-health advisor handed me a list. 49 medical schools that accept international students? Out of more than 150 MD accepting programs in the United States, my world shrank overnight because of a visa? I emailed all the 49 and was met with a new kind of disappointment. Some of them accepted international students, but only limited it to Canadians or green card holders. Some others accepted students like me, but had expectations like any other American student who has been stacking experiences years after years before college by volunteering, shadowing, or scribing. Where I grew up, that system did not exist. In Bahrain, you just can't go to a hospital and ask to volunteer or shadow or scribe. So my only option was to begin here. But that added new barriers because of my visa. I had limited work authorization, restricted access, basically system not built for someone like me. People had been running this marathon for years and I had just found out where the starting line was. Which is also ironic because I am a terrible runner. And yet, when everything was uncertain, it did not mean that I gave up. Something in me refused to stop. The very discipline that I mentioned earlier, the constant monitoring, turns out it never was a restriction. It was a preparation. And at the center of that surveillance team was the person who taught me that responsibility is quiet persistence. He taught me how to keep going long before I knew I needed to. My grandfather, my Dadaji. It was August 2013. I was 8 years old. My Dadaji had a blockage in his heart and he had to travel from Bahrain to India for treatment. Around that age, you do not really understand what a blockage is. People in your house are talking in careful voices and all you know that someone you love is leaving. I was scared, not only because he was my grandfather, but he was the center of my life. My parents worked, so he carried my childhood in his hands. He took me to school, he picked me up, and while driving, he would sing his favorite song. Phule, phule, dhole, dhole, bahe ki mridu bai. I would be seated at the back seat, listening while he would smile and tell me that his granddaughter would one day become a doctor with complete certainty. Around that age, I did not really understand what that meant. And then he left. And for some time, everything paused. I watched my family closely. I saw what worry looks like and what silence sounds when people are trying not to cry. And then he returned, healthier, steadier, like nothing had happened. And little Saad's first thought was so simple. Doctors had given him back to us. Around that time, Dadaji and I used to play doctor. I would have a toy stethoscope around me, around my neck, and I would press it against his chest and ask him to take a deep breath in, out. And my grandfather, he would smile and tell that his goodie would one day become a doctor. Between that fear and that relief, that game stopped being a game. It became my purpose. I wanted to become a doctor not because someone had written it into my life. I wanted to become a doctor because I had seen medicine save someone who meant everything to me. So when college got loud and ASU's party reputation surrounded me and distractions became easier, I reminded myself what was at stake. The dream that began in the backseat of a car in Bahrain deserved commitment. The foundation my surveillance team had built within me, the quiet strength my Dadaji had instilled in me had already given me a voice. The one that had instructed me to pause, to think, and to choose. So I chose, even when many international students were quietly stepping away from pre-med because of how difficult the path was, I stayed. I explained my situation again and again. I looked for clinical exposure everywhere I could. I created opportunities where none were handed to me, and slowly the doors began to open. I became the only international student to be chosen as an intern at the Mayo Clinic and the only international student to be chosen into ASU's prestigious Next Generation Service Corps. Possibilities that once seemed impossible. Every achievement, every scholarship, and every milestone, I would call and share all of it with my Dadaji. Until January 25th of this year. Just weeks after I had left for the United States, he had to travel to India again for treatment. And I had a strange feeling inside me. Every day, I prayed, please let him stay. Please let him see me become a doctor. he never will. For a long time, I thought freedom was loud. Maybe the car keys, the world map, the permission to go wherever. But now I know it's quiet. It is deciding to not giving up, even when the path seems harder. And it is continuing, even when the person who first believed in you is no longer there to guide you. Dadaji, I know you're watching me, and I'm walking towards that Dr. Saaj. I promise you, I will make you proud.